So time for a roundup of Warhammer 40k news now. Let's talk about the Emperor's Children release, what's been selling out around the world, what's not, and what's being scalped. Delve into a mini expansion for Warhammer 40k, bringing some warp storms and hazardous battlefields to the tabletop, a new combat patrol rule set for the Emperor's Children, and a few other Warhammer 40k news things and what's coming next for the game. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today it's time for another news roundup video, talking through a few interesting Warhammer 40k things that I found interesting over the past few days, though perhaps none of which really needed an entire video all to themselves. Let's start with the Emperor's Children release, and talk about that mini expansion with all very warped battlefields, and then go through some combat patrol rules, new releases, and what's coming next for 40k. First up, this has been the big weekend for the Emperor's Children release. The new model kits and boxes have gone on sale in the UK and EU and Australia. A few discount stores have gone live in the USA and Canada. The main Games Workshop web store, I believe, will be going live with their kits in the next hour or so after this releases. This one had a bunch of interesting model kits, an extraordinarily expensive codex, and a release of a Primarch which Games Workshop have often handled kinda badly before in my opinion. So I was certainly interested to see whether or not they actually managed to have enough supply of the models this time around, both in their own web store and discount retailers around the world. This is the rough demand for their model kits over the weekend from the last video. It looked like Fulgrim and Lucius the Eternal were the most popular things that people wanted to pick up this weekend. Lots of people want the Combat Patrol box set, but Games Workshop haven't released it yet, and the Lord Cacophonist was the next most popular after that. I think Fulgrim was the one that most people had their eyes on, and it does seem broadly kind of positive news from Games Workshop on that one. Looking at the Games Workshop web store in the UK and EU, and the one in Australia and New Zealand, it looks like they still have a good number of the miniatures available. They haven't sold out in seconds like Lionel Johnson did when they released him. That kind of remains to be seen in the USA and Canada yet. Looks like there's a fair few copies of him still around at discount retailers. In the UK it looks like Element Games is out of them, though still has copies of the Champions box set. Some other stores have them though. The Outpost and Firestorm Games, which are also channel affiliates, discounters, both seem to have Fulgrim in stock at less than Games Workshop's price, so I'll link those in the video description. In the EU and Germany, Taschengeldeep still has some. In Canada, Toy Snowman has plenty at 15% off, and in Australia, Gap Games still had some at time of recording. There weren't many left though, so it might not be that much longer there. Wargame Portal in the USA did get quite a lot of them, but sold out really fast due to demand. I hope it's not going to turn into another situation where the USA and Canada seem to sell out far quickly than other places around the world. They do seem to have done worse for stock allocations in recent waves. Broadly speaking, at least for a lot of people around the world, seems that if you want to pick up Great Big Demon Snake Boy, then you can. I guess we'll wait and see whether or not it sells out in the US and Canada web store dead fast like some of the recent big boxes have. What did seem kind of interesting though for the other kits that they released, there's a couple that seem to be in far worse supply. It looks like both of these models have sold out really quickly on the Games Workshop web store for the UK and EU, and that kind of implies they just didn't make enough of them. And it does seem to be a fairly similar story for discount retailers around the world as well. The vast majority of the channel affiliate ones seem to be sold out of both of these miniatures. After having a quick look around, it looks like in the UK Firestorm Games has Lucius and the Lord Cacophonist at their discount, and in Canada Toy Snowman, also links below, still has some copies of Lucius left, but most of the other places that are checked were out of them. Obviously, being regular range models, they will cycle back into stock again, so it's not like you're missing out on a big box or anything like that, but they do seem to have made very little of these for people who wanted them right away. Finally though, for the other really big ticket item from the Emperor's Children was the big fancy limited edition codex book, and this was the one that just had the sort of ludicrous price tag with Fulgrim on the cover, £155, €200 or $250, the one with the metal objective markers plus the datasheet cards and the Chaos coin bit, and it looks like this one has sold out absolutely instantly in the UK and EU web store. One person who commented on one of my channel posts said that this one literally disappeared absolutely instantly when it went on sale. Certainly less than 5 minutes to buy, maybe less than 1 minute, even despite its absolutely massive price tag of around about 4 times the cost of a regular codex. Still looks like it's available in Australia at time of recording if you give Games Workshop an absolutely whopping 420 Australian dollars for the book. It does seem that this one's going the regular way of Games Workshop limited edition releases. A big central one that lots of people have focused on has sold out instantly and is then becoming a scalper's dream. I can see 3 listed on the UK that have sold 1 copy at least already, the minimum of which went for £260, which is kind of crazy being an extra £100 over the price that I already certainly would not have paid for the book, and again feels like a pretty bad example of Games Workshop limited release scalping. Let me know your experiences with the Emperor's Children launch wave though. Did you manage to get the things that you were after, and did you manage to get them at discount if so? I'll leave the links to the stores mentioned down in the video description. Any purchases through those help to support Auspex Tactics as normal. Before we move on though, I'll just give a special call out to Toy Snowman in Canada, as they're the store that generously sponsored today's video, and they're one solid option for getting plastic soldiers just that little bit cheaper in Canada. They're basically a gaming and collectibles store based in Montreal, Canada, active since 2019, and after seeing a lot of interest in their Joy Toy 40k figures, have started stocking the main Warhammer 40k range as well, and are looking to expand and build this up. I've certainly been hopping on the big release waves for 40k. They have a 15% off Warhammer prices, which is the maximum that you're normally allowed to sell at discount in the USA and Canada. I'll leave their website linked down in the video description. It's pretty easy to search and navigate, and they have some of the normal offerings that discount retailers often do to improve their service. Free shipping on anything over $150 Canadian. And if you want some 40k models that they don't have in stock, you can message their sales email address to order it in for you. For the Emperor's Children release in particular, they seem to be better stocked than the vast majority of other discount retailers out there. Looks like they still have Fulgrim and Lucius the Eternal and basically all the other Emperor's Children releases at 15% discount currently, besides the Lord Cacophonist. Apparently they'll try and get a few more of those in when Games Workshop have their pre-orders go live, depending on whether or not Games Workshop themselves sell out super fast, I guess. In any case, a massive thank you to them for sponsoring the video, and I'll leave them links down in the video description. Next up, and it looks like Games Workshop have released another one of their sort of mini expansion things for Warhammer 40k. This is a series that might well be a regular thing in the White Dwarf magazine, it seems, and the basic idea is that it's a sort of twist that you can put on regular Warhammer 40k games if you want to shake things up from the normal way of doing things. They aim to be at least somewhat relevant to both match play and crusade games or whatever other rule set that you are using. It's not going to be something that's hyper competitive or hyper balanced or anything like that, more for fun and variety factor in casual games. And I can't help but think that it's probably one thing amongst many that Games Workshop's trying to do to more clearly communicate that they're very much trying to make content for all 40k players and not just the competitive scene. White Dwarf has had a fairly steady stream of these sort of rule sets, plus things for Crusade, and Combat Patrol rules and things coming out of it recently. The last kind of mini expansion that they did was the option to swap out all the core stratagems for a bunch of different ones. It definitely would be a massive shake-up on the normal way of playing 40k, with options to do things like indirect fire at close range, big charges in the enemy turn, or just really long charges in general, plus just big damage stratagems full stop. I felt like the idea of that was interesting enough, though I can't admit it to be something that would massively inspire me to play that way. I think it's just the whole mental load of just unlearning a whole bunch of things that we sort of take as the way that the game is played in 40k and having to unlearn them, but just for one game mode. But let me know if you played any games with that previous aspects of War 1 down in the comments below. I'd certainly be interested to hear any rules anecdotes. In any case, basically this time they've done another one which I think might be a bit more interesting and a bit easier as a bolt-on. This one's from White Dwarf 511 and it's called Adverse Phenomena. It sounds like the basic idea for this one is for a battle fought in a hazardous environment of some sort. Between the rules and the lore behind it, it maybe feels like, say your armies are fighting in a battlescape where there's sort of a warp storm roiling across it, occasionally shrouding some units, illuminating others, or occasionally sapping the will from some enemies or empowering others. Mechanically, there's a couple of dice rolls and a couple of tables to consult, but overall just doesn't really seem all that complicated to add onto a game once you get your head around it. For the setup at the start of the game, you basically roll a 1d6 at the start of the battle, and this determines the map of the areas that might be affected by the hazardous conditions. Here's my very rough interpretations of the maps that you can get, and depending on a random roll it might either be the grey area or the orange area that's affected. But basically for the rest of the game you'll know whether the warp storm effects are, say, going into different table quarters or going to be affecting sort of some diagonal light slants, or either the centre of the board or everything outside of it, or similar things like that. Beyond those, there's also one where you divide the board into 6 evenly divided squares. There's one with a centre line down the board and the potential to either be affected or safe within 6 inches of it, and one where it basically either affects everything 12 inches from the edge or everything that's further than that. So that's done at the start of the game, and then that map applies to the rest of the turns, and then basically at the start of each battle round you essentially roll the weather forecast. You roll a 1d6 to determine the area affected. If the number's odd, it's the orange bits. If you roll an even number, it's the grey bits that are affected. And then you roll 1d6 to determine what the effect would be from a further table. And that's the bits that will actually impact your units. What's maybe at least kind of interesting is that you can do a bit of planning around it, as the rolls that you do at the start of the first battle round don't actually happen straight away in the first battle round. They only take effect in the second battle round, so everything's basically delayed a turn. That means that everything will be acting as normal as it is turn 1, and then when you go into battle round 2 and onwards, you'll start to have these effects in play, basically have something happening on the board, and then also at the start of each battle round, you'll determine what happens in the next, so you'll essentially have a 1-turn weather forecast. Then here are the actual effects that you get. Broadly speaking, the first 4 are bad and the last 2 are good. One is Innovation, which saps -2 to your movement characteristic each time a unit starts a move within the affected area. Number 2 gives you -1 toughness from radiation. Basically these effects all apply to anything that's within the area, so that includes units partially within. Number 3 is Confusion, and prevents the units from using stratagems. Really quite an impactful one there that could have some very big in-game impacts. Number 4 is Illumination. The units within the area can't gain cover, and enemies won't suffer any negative penalties to their ballistic skill or hit roll when targeting those. So basically makes your units a bit easier to kill at range. Number 5 has a bit of the opposite going on, and that's Darkness, so your units gain stealth, so I guess that's a positive one if your opponent happens to have some heavy firepower on the go. And then for the 6th one, everything goes into mad damage mode with the power one, and that allows you to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. And that sounds like a lot of carnage when it happens across the battlefield. Loads of units to get affected by that, and then it'll basically be a game-wide fairly big damage buff. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on the expansion. Would you be tempted to use it or not? For first impressions for me, I think I'd be more tempted to use this one versus the previous one that swapped out all the core stratagems. That one just sounds like a bit of a headache to me really, even if it could make for a pretty wild and different game. This one just feels like it to be playing 40k on a bit more of a normal thing, but having to bear these random effects coming down in mind. I guess it could give you some incentive to try and get your units either affected or not affected by the buffs as other things to think about when moving them around the board. But on the other hand, I feel like a lot of the time you just still might not be able to necessarily change things too much, and they're just going to get affected regardless of whether or not you want them to, and probably just ultimately makes the game a fair bit more random. I feel like if you have a few rolls on this one that massively favour, say, a gunline army, it could cause problems with them. Maybe if you roll the Innovation one or the Illumination one a few turns in a row. That feels like it could give a shooting army really quite a big advantage over a melee one, though I guess you could roll the stealth and just have the shooting army function worse. And I guess a couple of them have the potential to make units easier to kill, particularly that power one. It adds a whole load of lethality to the game, which would be kind of crazy. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people feel 40k is rather lethal already. Overall though, it feels a bit less game breaking compared with the stratagem swaps though. I think it does add a little bit of fun factor, but at the same time I do feel like these sort of effects descending from the sky, as they've often done in the past with say like warp storm tables, don't really feel incredibly empowering to a player. Maybe just the dice gods throwing you some boons or disadvantages kind of at random, and the armies still get on to do what they would be doing otherwise, maybe without crazy amounts of player agency. And a few of them could be a bit feels bad if say you denied a stratagem that you absolutely needed and your unit's got no chance to avoid it, or same with not making a charge that you otherwise might have made. In any case, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Otherwise, in that White Dwarf issue, it was interesting to see that there's a few more rule sections for the Emperor's Children. There's quite a lot of focus in it just in terms of other content, but maybe one of the easiest ways to jump into 40k games with them could be to use their new Combat Patrol rules. This would be alongside the ones that they've had in their codex for the Flawless Blades, the Tormentor Squad and the Lord Exultants. This one does feel like a bit of a weird one though, as it's basically an Emperor's Children Combat Patrol that's only got 5 Tormentors as the actual Emperor's Children models. Then there's 2 units of demons in the Slash Demons and the Fiends, and a Chaos Sorcerer. I guess they're kind of going for a vibe to try and mirror the Allied Demons one from the Codex. So I sort of feel like instead of the Sorcerer, it probably would have been better to have an Emperor's Children HQ of some sort. Does seem like it could be of some interest to Emperor's Children players who did want to add some Allied Demons in as well. For the rules for the Combat Patrol, they still get the Emperor's Children core rule more or less. It's called Capricious Savagery here, and it basically has the fallback and advance and shoot and charge thing, but with these similar restrictions about not targeting the same thing or not recharging something that was already in engagement range at the start of the turn. And here it applies to the Demon's units as well. The choice of enhancements for the Sorcerer is either reroll wounds and damage rolls for his psychic attacks, or rerolling advances for his unit, and then a sort of charge in the enemy turn for a unit within 9 inches that's within 6 inches of an enemy unit, though you don't get a charge move bonus in the same way as Heroic Intervention. The choice of secondaries is either 2 victory points each time an enemy unit is destroyed, and then a further 2 whenever they fail Battle Shock, and weirdly enough a 1 victory point when your own units fail Battle Shock. And the choice between that and a choice of killing enemy character models, 5 victory points if you kill 1, and if all enemy characters are slain at the end of the game, score another 5. I guess against a lot of combat patrols, that's essentially kill 1 character and get 10 victory points. Then finally for the stratagems, there's a Battle Shock one. One unit that you just attacked takes a Battle Shock test, -1 to the test if they're below half strength, and if they fail it, then you can't use the stratagem again until the next battle round. I guess that could be one way to farm up victory points for the other secondary choice. There's a 1 command point +1 to wound in melee if strength isn't greater than the enemy's toughness, so I guess a lot of light attacks for a way to punch up with some fiends or something. And then there's a 1 command point 1 for a demon's unit to return to reserves. If you choose the demonettes, they also regain D3 models as well. Overall, it's probably going to be at least fairly niche interest, given it's not paired with a Combat Patrol box set or anything like that. And I feel like Allied Demons might not necessarily be top of the Emperor's Children collectors' priority lists, given how restricted to one detachment that they are in the Codex. Let me know down in the comments if you could see yourself playing this though. As well as that, there's also boarding patrol rules for the Emperor's Children in the magazine as well. That one's made up of their elites, 0 to 1 Lucius the Eternal, 0 to 2 Lord Cacophonus, and then 0 to 2 of Flawless Blades and Terminator units. I'll not go through the full rules for that one there, but might be worth knowing if you play boarding actions and you collect Emperor's Children. For a couple of minor model releases and reveals from Games Workshop, I'll just give a quick heads up for people in the UK that the Dark Apostle appears to be on sale at discount at £13.50 at the moment. Might be of interest to some Chaos Space Marine collectors out there. Full price it's £26, so quite a good saving even versus discount retailers here. That's via the Combat Patrol magazine issue 31, which seems to be in stock in Forbidden Planets, and I'll leave that links down in the video description below. I guess a fair few people might have already had him from the previous Combat Patrol box, though I do think he's quite a fun miniature and comes with his 2 little attendants. Could be good conversion fodder to something else potentially. Otherwise, they've got a bunch of the sort of middling discounts on Chaos Space Marines at the moment. The standard sort of Legionary squad, which are issues 33 to 34, Havocs for 35 to 36, and the Hellbrute for 37 to 38. I think they'd all be £26 in total for the price for the 2 magazines, including adding on postage, which again is quite a good saving even versus discount retailers for those kits, but probably a discount that won't be hanging around into the extreme long-term future. Finally, just for one last fun model reveal, it seems that the Lord of the Rings has a new Ent. It's quite fun to see Forge World just coming out with a steady supply of new minor releases for the Lord of the Rings, Necromunda, and other gaming systems week on week. It seems that Games Workshop are managing to make sort of slightly lower volume sales, but big numbers of different sculpts work for them at the moment. This one's called Beachbone apparently, and he's ready to fling some rocks at Isengard. It looks like if you want a whole forest of them, they've got 4 different Ent sculpts, including Tree Beers, a regular one, and one called Birch Seeds. Probably fairly expensive because it's in resin though. I believe the other Forge World resin one that they had was around £60 or $100 more or less. Finally, looking to the future for Warhammer 40k. After the big Adepticon reveals, we've got really quite a lot on the horizon. For the next major model release waves, we've got the Deity Legion Codexes, so World Eaters, Thousand Suns and Death Guard, all of them with battle forces and presumably new combat patrols. I really wouldn't be too surprised if they wind up just turning up in one massive weekend, though I guess we'll see what Games Workshop has intended there. Otherwise, we've got the Space Wolves launch box. That's really quite a highly anticipated one. I'm genuinely not too sure whether or not that might jump ahead of the Deity Legions or they'll come first. I suspect that one of them will follow the other fairly fast though. And then otherwise there's a bunch of other things. The Emperor's Children Combat Patrol box sets, Kill Team Typhon with its Tyrannid Raveners versus Admech Servitors, the Armageddon Crusade book, then the Grey Knights Codex and Battle Force, and we know a few of the other things after that. If I had to guess at the next Games Workshop reveal show, it looks like they've got a US tournament in the Dallas Open around the 22nd to the 25th of May. I suspect that might be when we get our next preview online, and given that we know the identity of a bunch of other 40k codexes coming after that, I think we'll be odds on to get more Space Wolves for their main release wave, and then probably some combination of new miniatures for Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, Black Templars and Space Marines. I believe there'd also been some talk of the possibilities of a new Heresy big box as well. I can't say I've been keeping up with that too closely, but could mean a whole load of power armor for fairly cheap potentially. Also, we've got that new mission deck and presumably a great big balance update to come alongside it in the summer. That's the one with the sort of 2025 to 26 branding, and the cards with those challenger bonuses on. And going by their previous couple of releases, that should drop probably around early June sort of time. They could certainly be a little bit earlier or a bit later if Games Workshop feels like it. Quite a lot of stuff on the horizon though. In any case, I'll leave that there for now though. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to the big Emperor's Children release. Would you be tempted to play some 40k battles with some adverse phenomena on the go? And what are your hopes and expectations for the next reveals and releases for 40k? Look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below as per normal. As mentioned, feel free to check out Toy Snowman, the sponsor of the video, linked down in the video description if you want some discount Warhammer 40k stuff in Canada, particularly Fulgrim or some of the new Emperor's Children release. Thanks to them for sponsoring this one. I'll leave that one there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.